Hey, welcome back. Dan Blewett here. This is Dear Baseball Gods episode 57. And man, the episodes are really piling up. So, a couple of things I want to mention real quick. So, if you do enjoy the show and you want to help me put out more content, number one, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes. You'll get notified anytime I put out new stuff, and I'm trying my best to put out new videos, a podcast every week, a couple instructionals each week, tons of stuff on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, all that. So subscribe and feel free to follow up with me. Secondly, if you're not on my email list, I'll just send out notifications every week, just give you a little bit of an update what's going on, and also some of my new content. So typically I'm 4 emails a month, maybe 2, but if you don't yet subscribe, feel free to jump on my website. Any of the opt-ins for a free ebook, I have tons of great knowledge that I want to give to you for free in exchange. So if you're not yet a member, definitely jump on that. So this week, what I want to talk about is really just the long-term aspect of being away from the game. Whether this is the fall, whether this is injury, whether it's winter, whether it's graduating, it doesn't really matter. Being away from baseball is, I think, one of the biggest challenges as far as coming back from an injury. And I know some of the questions I've gotten from the couple injured clients that I work with from afar, the questions that I've gotten on Instagram, on Twitter, people asking, like, how did you come back from Tommy John? Because I've had it twice, obviously. And, what did you do to help your rehab along? So I figured today I would discuss how hard it is to be away from the game when you're going to be on the shelf for a while, and some of the ways to cope with that. Because I think a lot of times that's the hardest aspect, especially of a surgical recovery, because it's such a long road back where it's easy to kind of forget what baseball looks like. It's kind of easy to forget the passion that you have for it and then just sort of fade out, and that's sort of it. So obviously a number of bigger name prospects and major leaguers fell down to Tommy John recently. The young flamethrower from the White Sox recently underwent, I think, is going to undergo his second. So it's something that continues to bite all of us. But the biggest thing for me that I struggled with during either of my surgeries was that I just felt so far from the game. And so if you remember, if you've listened to previous podcasts, I've spent 4.5 years, including my last season when I was released and then retired, really more like 5 years on the shelf from a combination of shoulder injuries, elbow injuries, all that stuff. And just the timing of it can make, a Tommy John surgery 1 year, or it can easily make it 2 years. So in the case of Ohtani, who just blew his out and is, I think, going to undergo surgery anytime soon, he's going to miss the whole next season just because of the timeline. And then for me, with 2 August surgeries, they're both in August, I wasn't ready to pitch even in that second year. So then I had to go through the entire offseason again, which made my recovery before I was back in a competitive game, closer to like 20 months, something like that. So it gets really, really long and at some point you feel like I could just get a job, and, I guess I don't miss baseball as much as I used to. But so just to recap, the way the surgery or any major surgery goes is like this. Obviously you get surgery, and then you go home, and you're just in like this woe is me kind of phase for a while, where you look at your arm, you look at your knee, you look at whatever, and you're kind of like, is this really my life? And it takes a little while to cope and kind of get over it, where, you have this beautifully functioning arm or leg or whatever it was, and now you look down at it and it just like has no life. You have the strength of not even of an infant, and it just seems so far away, where then we had to sprint like you used to, jump like you used to, throw and run and pitch like you used to. So one of the big challenges is just that mental hurdle. Like, man, like, I'm so far away, and what's mapped out ahead of you. It's 9 months, it's 6 months, it's 12 months or whatever it is. And it just gets really, really tough to see that far in the distance. So in that first couple of weeks, your strength starts to come back a little faster. You can start to squeeze things, and, you can start to jostle it around a little bit. Again, depends on the surgery, but for me, the early parts were just so, like, I'm so far away from everything. This is so boring. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, you can't exercise the same way, and you're just kind of trying to grit through it. And there's no, like, big, easy recommendation except trying to distract yourself trying to find other things that you're passionate about. And unfortunately for athletes, so much of your psyche and your identity is tied up in your sport and what you do every single day for it, that when you don't have it in any capacity at all, it just, you're just kind of like, well, what do I do? And I know that when I let go of baseball, when I retired, that whole next year was like, why am I getting out of bed today? Like, what am I doing? Like, what's my goal in life now? And that's a whole nother podcast episode, and it's one I've done before. But the costume that you wear, suddenly, like, you have to put it in the closet. Like, you don't know what it is that your purpose is. What are you doing? And there's a lot of that identity stuff too rolled into surgery, or just anytime you're away from your sport for a long time. It's just one of those things where it's tough to find yourself and figure out why you're coming back, what you're doing, and like who you are in the process. Because for a long time you're just like not an athlete. You're this guy with this messed up arm, this messed up leg, whatever it is, and it's just like the farthest thing. Like who you used to be, the things you could do, you're just like not that person right now. And you feel very broken, and you can feel very alone and helpless, and it's just like, again, it's like so far in the future, and there's not a darn thing you can do about it to speed the process up. So that's one of the really tough things following any surgery, and I know other players feel it just the same as I did. And it's super cliche, but you really just have to take it one day at a time. And you're like, all right, well, I made it to sleep tonight, I'm gonna wake up in the morning, and then I gotta make it the next day. And that's not how you want to live. You don't want to live day to day and sleep to sleep, trying just to like piece it together to get back to baseball. Like, hopefully you have other things in your life, people around you and other things that you can do. But for a while, a lot of times you're just like immobile, and you just like really can't do a whole lot. So it's one of those scenarios where you're just like, your identity as a person is like a little bit fractured, and that's one of the things that really goes with the whole surgery aspect. So it's problematic, and there's not a whole lot, I think, that can be said or done for it. You just have to have good people around you. You have to try to stay positive. You just have to try to like do something that kind of energizes you and gets you out of bed for that whole first couple months, because at that point you're just like doing so little, and you're such a shell of your former athlete self that there's just it's just a challenge. So after the first couple months, you start to have function back. Maybe you get out of your brace, or maybe you're walking around again. You're not on crutches, whatever it is. Because again, like my experience with Tommy John surgery is the little nitty gritty day to day details of, obviously, like I'm rehabbing my elbow as opposed to like a shoulder or a knee or whatever it is, or a back. Those details are different because the surgery is different, but the day to day stuff is all the same. Like you go get your treatment. You have, your PT is a big part of your life, and your physical therapist is a big person in your corner and a big person in your life, and they help guide you and mentor you through the whole thing. But once you start to get some mobility back, it becomes exciting, where you start to like, okay, I can do something new today, and I get to do something new on Wednesday, and now 2 months later I get to do this next thing because I'm going to go see the doctor, and he's going to clear me to do more things. So the whole process continues to evolve as you start to get your baby feet back underneath you. Like, you get to walk again, you start to like progress, and that becomes a lot more exciting, where you're like, okay, I can work hard today, like I can have a really good PT session, I can go out and jog, and I can go out and walk, and I can do all these things. And then basically from there we can go. And so as you're starting to move forward and things are getting better and you can do more and more things, then again, it just starts to spiral, and you start to feel like your old self. You start to feel like, you are in the gym when you first started working out. Like, you started to learn how to do new things. You started to get stronger from week to week. You started to get faster. Like, your velocity came up, all that stuff. You start to feel the same progression, the same way you used to feel, any athletic endeavor. So at that second couple months, it gets a lot more exciting because you're preparing yourself, and you can start to feel like a next phase coming. For obviously for pitching injuries, it's the hey, like, I'm getting close to throwing. Like, I'm 2 months away from throwing now, and the prospect of throwing again, even though it's, if you look at my YouTube channel, the Tommy John Chronicles. I chronicled my second surgery, and every week I took a video showing what I was doing. And it's funny, as I go back and look through them, I'm like, man, like I have a better personality than that. Like I'm like kind of funny sometimes. Like, God, why are these videos so horrible and depressing? And like, ugh, I wish I had put some color into them and like made them a thing. But that was also an accurate representation of how I felt in life in general. I was in front of the camera, which, at that age, I was still like somewhat new to being in front of the camera. Like I did YouTube videos and all that in my first couple years as a strength coach, and with my blog, I've been blogging for almost 10 years now. But still, at that point, like 20, well, I guess that was at 26. I was just like not super comfortable talking into the camera. Like, here's me as a person, being vulnerable and going through all this stuff. And that was obviously one of the intents and purposes of me filming that sort of like year-long documentary. But God, I was just like super boring and very just matter of fact, because that's kind of how I felt. I'm like, I just want to come back. I just want to like be me again. And this is what I did today. And I'm looking forward to the next thing. But this is what I did today. This is how I feel. And there wasn't a whole lot of, I don't know, rah, rah, rah from me, because I just had such a vision on the future that I found it tough to stay focused on today. Like I wasn't like, I can throw 61 miles per hour now. Like I was just like, 61 sucks. Like let's get back to 90. And I'm doing 1 pound dumbbells now. I'm doing 4 pound dumbbells. Like there's no trophy for that. But it was just it was a long-term process, and I've always been that kind of person who looks pretty far ahead, where I can like grit through a lot of stuff now because I'm not really focused I'm focused in the future. And so, but I know that in those months leading up to or the couple weeks, especially leading up to throwing again, I was getting a lot more excited to do things that were like putting me on the fast track to get back finally, right? So if you look at my my Tommy John Chronicles, the first day I threw was just like these awful lobs, and you look through and you're like, wow, like that's where I started, just like 32 miles per hour. I threw to a radar gun in my second surgery, and it's just like almost painful to go back and watch doing that, but that's how it is. It's very step by step, and even then you're like, man, this is all I can do. This is like pathetic. This is depressing. I'm throwing 40 miles per hour today, and how am I ever going to get back to 90? So in the next 3 to 4 to 5, 6 months, everything gets a lot better because you start to become you again. So once you start throwing, you're clear to lift, you're clear to run more. So you have like a relatively normal day-to-day regimen, and the only thing that's missing is like obviously in-game competition and just the throwing that you would normally do. But everything else that all the other Division I athletes were doing, or all the other pro athletes were doing, was they were lifting, they're running, they're doing their arm care, they're doing all this other stuff. So you still get all that. So you start to feel a little more like you, like a little bit of your identity starts to come back. And that's one thing that I feel like really started to perk me up, was that, okay, like I feel like myself. Like my routine that I had when I was healthy is this mostly the same routine that I have now, even though I'm rehabbing, even though I'm still 6 months away. And when you have that routine, you're working hard, you can go out and, all right, I did my things today. Like I really inched myself forward, and I wake up and I'll do it again tomorrow. So you start to just like fill your day with more meaningful things that start to like make you feel whole again. Because again, so much of your identity is kind of fractured, and you just feel not whole for a long time right after surgery. You feel just incapable of anything meaningful. So once you start throwing, and for ACL rehabs, like we've done a bunch of these in my academy, once they start, they can like do some lunges, they can do some body weight squats, they can start to jog. You just like start to see them change. Like they start to feel like, okay, this feels like athletics again, right? This feels like me again. And then you're kind of in like that last phase. But this is kind of like, it's kind of like a false summit. So here's the problem. And I'll use an analogy of the Colorado Springs, it's called the Manitou Incline. So if you've ever been to Colorado Springs and you want to feel like death, you should go to Pikes Peak. And there's this thing, it's like 1.25 miles cut straight up into this like first peak. and it's called the incline. It's like these big, like 8x8 square, like railroad ties that just make steps all the way up this super steep mountain. And I think at like the .8 mile mark or something like that, it's it's very close to the top. Maybe like you're maybe like 80% done. You see the top and you're like, oh, I'm almost there. But it's a false summit because basically it goes up like this and then it levels off. It's slightly less inclined above it, but you can't see the top. So it's a false summit. So you get close, you go, I see the top, I'm motivated, I'm going. And then you get there and then you see the slightly less incline, but you see the real summit and you're like, oh God, you've got 20 more minutes of hiking up these things to go. Your legs are burning, the air's thin, your lungs are burning. It was a very difficult experience just walking up it. And some people run those things. It's crazy. They're insane people. So the idea of having a false summit in your rehab, especially for pitching, and again, I've never torn my ACL. I don't have these other things. But in Tommy John, there's a false summit. So the false summit is around 10 months, 10 months, depending on the person. And it's a false summit because you get your velocity back. You're allowed to throw curveballs. You're allowed to throw sliders, changeups, whatever it is. But when you get your velocity back, that's like the false summit because you feel like you're there. And if you're like me, that happened in, like June of both of my surgeries. And I'm like, baseball season's going. I can do this. I can make it because I throw 92 again. No, like you're so far from actually being done that it just becomes another incredibly frustrating situation where you feel like you can go out there and do it. Like you're on the sidelines, like I want to go run, like I want to go run with the other kids and play, and you can't. You could run out there and throw a couple 92 mile per hour heaters in some general vicinity to the catcher without any real command. You could maybe throw a curveball for a strike, probably not. Maybe throw a changeup for a strike, probably not. They'd both probably suck. And the next day, you'd be really sore. You might have a little pain, and then you probably couldn't pitch for like a whole another 5 days or a week because your body's just still not used to it. So you like have the skill back, and like you can throw hard, but you can't command it. You can't slow the game down like you used to. It still takes time to be used to game speed. You have like no command of your off-speed stuff, whether it's your curveball, slider, changeup, whatever it is. Very little command of that. And you still have a long way to go bouncing back to withstand the rigors of a college or high school or pro season. So obviously, like in pro ball, especially in independent ball, it's the most cutthroat place to come back because they're not just gonna be like, oh, it's fine. Like, especially in independent ball where you're only there to win games because it's individual management, like the team ownership has to put fans in the stands because they're just a viable business. They're not going to hold your hand. If you can't pitch and pitch when they need you to pitch, then you just can't play on the team. If you're an affiliated ball and they care about you and they're having you come back, like you'll do some rehab starts and all that stuff. Obviously, the big leaguers, they do a bunch of rehab starts in minor league baseball and then come back up if they ever make it back up. And in the minor leagues, it's a similar situation, but those guys they have to perform pretty much right away too. I know tons of teammates who, as soon as they're done their Tommy John rehab, like they get cut. And that was how it went for them. Or they got another year, but they still get judged on the same criteria. So no one really comes back and they're statistically the same right away, right? So if you you play your season in AA, you get Tommy John, you miss a year, you come back, then you're put back in AA, and now you have a 7 ERA or a 6 ERA or a 5 ERA instead of the sparkling 3 ERA they did before. They're like, he can't do it anymore. They get rid of him. You need a whole nother year to like reestablish yourself as the guy who that's I'm me again. Like I'm statistically me again. Even though but as soon as you're capable of running out there and throwing 92 with your slider for strikes and this, then you're back in there and you're pretty much graded on the same things that everyone else is. And if you're not a really high money guy or a guy they really will continue to invest their time in and let you come back fully, which will probably take more like 2 seasons than 1 season, you're probably just going to be gone. I know a lot of my teammates who'd had Tommy John, that was their story. They came back, they got some time with their team again, but they didn't pitch super well, or they pitched just kind of mediocre, and then that was it. So it's unfortunately very cutthroat. And in indie ball, obviously, there was no rehab starts for me. It was, can he pitch or can he not pitch? And so this idea of like, hey, I'm ready. I can throw 92. Like I'm ready to go back in. If you go back in there and you suck, that's just it. Like that might be the end of your career. And as I look back on my own career, I realized like how slippery of a precipice I was probably walking on. Right? I came back in 2010. That was my rookie season. That was the first time I pitched since college because I got Tommy John to end my college career, missed the whole next season, then came back and started in pro baseball. So I was starting back in a higher level than I'd ever pitched in, which was pro ball, and I had to just like be good at it from right then. I hadn't pitched competitively since college, so obviously that's the same story with a lot of guys, but they were healthy in college, they graduate, then they get their chance in pro ball. So still held to the same standard, which is fine, and I was lucky that I did well. My second time, it was kind of the same situation. I got an August surgery, missed the whole next year, then came back, and I got cut in my first spring training back, and then I caught on with the team 2 weeks later when they needed a replacement pitcher, and there it was. I was like, I had to pitch well right then, or a couple of weeks later I'd be released too, and that would probably be the end of me. So it becomes pretty tough to say I'm ready like now versus some earlier time when you're not truly ready. And I had a story like that too. So in my second surgery, I came back in June. Well, I didn't come back in June. In June, I was throwing 92, 94 again, something like that. And I threw, after I finished my formal rehab at like the 9-month mark, you start to go like throw in simulated games. You start to pitch in adult league games or whatever it is to try to like get up to true full speed, like adrenaline speed. And so I started doing that, and the first time out, I was pitching in a local men's league in Colfax, Illinois, which I don't even know where that town is, but I got out there, I just subbed for a local team, and it was my goal just to do like 3 or 4 of these and then be done, and then go try out, make the team, and start back up. Right around the 12-month mark was my goal, somewhere in August. And so I pitched this first outing, and I expected to go 3 innings, because I'd throw sim games in my academy of like 1 to 2 innings, and I was fine. I was throwing hard. I was throwing like 88 to 90, something like that, which was good, especially for indoors, because I've never been able to throw more than like 90 indoors. So I go out, and it really pissed me off. I talked to this catcher who was like a Division II or Division III catcher, like nice enough kid. Go out there my first inning, and I'm just like absolutely just letting it eat. So I knew, it was like, rule number 1 is if this is 100%, it needs to be true 100%. I have to let it go, like fully let it go. So my first goal in that first like competitive, adult men's league game out in the cornfield with, just wives and girlfriends in the stands, I was going to throw it as hard as I could possibly throw it. And I knew that was going to come with no command because I'd done this before. It was my second surgery. And so I did. So I went out there and I just threw the absolute piss out of the ball. And threw enough strikes to like get through the inning fine. Like, I don't know, had a strikeout or 2, I don't really remember. And I like sit down, and my business partner at Warburg, Lucas, was there. I asked him to come and just like video me and do some radar gun. He brought our Stalker gun because I just wanted to have an idea of like where I was. And I asked the catcher, I was like, hey, what do you feel like I am velocity wise? He's like, oh, probably like 85, 88, something like that. And I'm like, okay. Now, some guys have good radar guns, like internal radar guns. Some guys don't. And what really pissed me off was that this was a Division III like catcher. And I'm not knocking on Division III baseball. There's some exceptional Division III baseball and some exceptional programs, exceptional players. But he doesn't see 94 very often in Division III baseball. It's like not that often, especially this was 4 or 5 years ago. And for him to say that I was 85 to 88 when I was actually 92 to 94, it's like made no sense to me. It's like, dude, I throw harder than probably any kid you'd caught all season or hit against all season, and you tell me that it's like the same velocity as that? It's like 85? Like, no one mistakes 94 for 85. So it was irritating. Just a side note. But to get back on track here, I intended to throw 3 innings. In the second inning, I kept going along, and I started to get elbow pain like about halfway through, and I wasn't throwing a ton of strikes, so like the inning kind of labored on. I think I allowed a hit and like an error behind me, and I was like, I got to get off this mound. And so finally I finished the inning, but I was like pretty much like my dogs were barking. I was ready to get off. And so like that was kind of the story where it's like, all right, I can throw hard, and I was really excited that my velocity was like back. And I expected to probably be around 90 that day. I did not expect to be way above 90. Like 92, 94 was my pre-surgery peak, and just have that the very first time out was like, I was like, wow, I might throw 98 when I'm all like said and done. I didn't, but whatever. So for me, being 92, 94 that day was like really exciting, but it was again still a false summit because I feel like, okay, I've got the velocity now. If I have like 6 more weeks, like I'll be ready to pitch. And so that was the mindset that I had after that game, which was not really the right mindset to have because it was catching on the end of the summer. So this was like middle of June, and my goal, and I called the guy who acts as my agent. I always want to just call my agent because it's just easier than explaining that. This guy was really just an advisor for me for my whole career, but I was a plebeian, so I never really had an agent. He never was never an official agreement, but he was like always in my corner. He'd make calls, get me places, he'd drive me to tryouts, all that stuff. So I called Bob, and I said, hey, this is how it went today. Like, do you think you can get me a tryout? Do you think I can catch on with the team by the end of the summer? He said, yeah, like, we'll see. So he made some calls. I called my other manager, Andy and Brooks, from Evansville and Normal, respectively, and said, hey, do you think I can catch on with one of the Atlantic League teams? I know you guys know a bunch of teams there, and I know you said you'd maybe make a call for me when I was healthy. Like, do you think you could do that? And he said, absolutely, absolutely. Like, just you let me know. Just keep throwing. Let me know when you're ready, and we'll make the call. So, a couple months later, like in maybe early August, I figured it was time because the Atlantic League season ends the second or third week of September. If I catch one for the last month, pitch well, then I'd like set myself up to be like ready to, for next season. Kind of establish myself on the team. That was the plan. And so all went sort of went to plan. Kept throwing. Andy made a call for me. They invited me up to throw. Said, hey, if you're better than one of the guys that we have, we'll take you. It's all ready to go. So I go up there, and I'm probably the same. I'm like low 90s. Command was okay. They had me throw in pregame. So they were in September. They already clinched the playoffs, I think, and they had me throw against their guys in BP. So I went out there throwing. Most guys were just taking. They were just watching them come in. A couple guys swung, but not many. And my command was okay. My curveball was okay. My changeup was like not really there. And I really want to make that team. I want to make it really bad. I want to just like go up there and like stick. And afterwards, they're like, like, you look good. You got a good fastball, and we just don't think you're quite there yet, but we're going to give you a spring training invite. We'll give you a contract for next spring training. And I was disappointed because I wanted to make that team. But as I drove back with my agent, call him my agent, he was like, why are you disappointed? I'm like, because I want to play. Like, I thought I could do this, and I thought I could make that team. And he's like, do you really think that? Like, really deep down, do you really think that? Do you really think you were ready? And I looked down at my arm as we were in a Suburban driving back to Maryland, and I was like kind of getting a little sore. And I'm like in my heart I knew. I'm like, no, you're probably right. He's like, yeah, I'm right. He's like, what were you gonna do? You're gonna go there and get, as a reliever, you're gonna get 4 innings in this month, and if they'd asked you to pitch 2 days in a row, could you have done it? And I'm like, no, probably not. They're like, yeah, so you're gonna go there, pitch 4 innings. Probably not be your best because your command was okay. Like, you throw hard, but what were you gonna get? He's like, you came here to get set up for next year. You got your contract, so you did. Like, you're there. You came here to do what you came here, and you did what you wanted to do. And I agreed. So at that point, it was over. For that summer, it was over. I was not going to return to baseball that summer. It was a huge disappointment because I wanted to compete. And I wanted to feel like I was back in the game, but I just really wasn't ready. I could throw hard. I could throw a curveball. It wasn't my best version. And my changeup wasn't really there. My command was like whatever, and I could really just only pitch. I could pitch Monday for like an inning, and then pitch again maybe Thursday. But again, that's not the rigors of, especially not of a pro baseball player. It's not of a college player either. Like, when you're a reliever, they call your name a lot, and they don't consider like, oh, he needs a little more time. They'll ask you from day to day, like, hey, are you good to go again today? Or like, do you need a day? Like, be honest. If you need a day, I'll give you a day. But I mean, throughout my next couple of seasons as a reliever, I pitched 4 out of 6 days, sometimes 5 out of 7 days. The last week of my first season, I pitched 6 days out of my last 8. Partly because I was volunteering for it because I wanted to, but that stuff's rough. Pitching 3 days in a row, I did that a couple of times. It's not easy, and you have to be fully ready to do all that stuff. That's the true demands of the job. Throwing a baseball hard is not the demands of the job. Throwing strikes is not the demands of the job. It's all this other stuff. It's having command, not control. It's being able to throw all your stuff for strikes. It's being able to pitch on consecutive days, being able to make every scheduled start that they ask of you. It's being able to be a full-time baseball player again, or being a full-time soccer player, full-time basketball player, whatever your injury, your sport is. It's about being full-time again without any restrictions. That's when you're ready, and that's why there's that fall summit, because you can do a lot of the things you used to be able to do. You can sprint in a straight line 5 months after ACL surgery, but can you outrun someone on the soccer field and cut and steal the ball from them and slide tackle them if you need to? No, probably not, right? It's that stuff is farther away. Can you do that for a whole game? Probably not, right? That's the problem with a lot of these surgeries, is that you get that false summit and you feel like you're ready to go, and sometimes you jump the gun. You're like ready to compete, and maybe someone lets you do it, and you hurt yourself again, or you just set yourself back, or then you start playing this mental game where you go out and you try to do it, and then you're set back, and then you're like, you start to worry about your arm. You start to coddle yourself. It's really tough to start to throttle up and throttle down. Like, am I okay? Am I not okay? Because that's the other big thing that's hard about surgery, is that when you are getting pain, which you invariably get pain, you always ask yourself the same question: am I hurt? Did I re-hurt it? Do I need surgery again? That's the biggest question I get from a lot of the guys that I work with, and I do remote consulting with some injured players, and I like doing that because there's so many uncertainties that's just not in a set program. It's not objective. It's like, let's just talk through it, that kind of stuff. And you need someone to talk through it with you. But most of the time, the answer is, let's wait and see how it feels tomorrow or in a couple days. And if it still feels really bad, then maybe we need to wait a week, or you're set back a little bit. But it could feel really bad today, and if it doesn't feel nearly as bad tomorrow, it feels like it's cleared up a lot, then you're probably fine. There's so much abnormal stuff that goes on in a surgery because your body's all messed up now. Your body's never going to be the same, and that's some of the best advice I ever got. I got it at the 2 different ASMI injury and baseball clinics, which I spoke at last year, and I attended as an attendee 2 years prior to that. It was the same guy, Stan Conti. If you don't know Stan Conti, he's used to be the Dodgers head athletic trainer, and he's still highly respected mind in the baseball injuries world. I think he does consulting now. He has his own company, but he's real blunt. He's been through it a million times, and I was just chatting with him both times, and I picked his brain a little bit, and he's like, here's the things to remember, because I told him that my first year back after my second surgery, I had this weird injury. I was doing fine. I think it was my 5th start. I had a finger injury where in the middle of my start, my forearm started cramping. One muscle, really narrow muscle, in the middle of my forearm started cramping, where my hand was doing this. I couldn't open my fingers to get around the ball. I tried to pitch through it, and then finally I couldn't. And I had almost carpal tunnel for 2.5 weeks. I was on the DL, and then I came back and it was fine. Never happened again. Now they took this ligament out, or not this ligament. They took the cadaver graft out of my arm from here, from my palmaris longus tendon, and that was probably the thing. So throughout my entire rehab coming back, no issues. And then I get in a game, no issues. And then my 5th start, suddenly I have this weird, mysterious cramping, and they're like, oh, it's flexor carpi tendonitis or whatever. And I'm like, why? And they're like, I don't know. And so I talked to Stan about it. I'm like, do you think that was related to my, the weird thing? Do you think that was related to them taking out my palmaris? And he's like, look, here's the thing to remember. They went in there with a knife, you tore a ligament. They went in there with a knife. They drilled holes in you. They stitched you up. They cut your muscle in half. They then stitched it back together. They did all this crazy stuff in your elbow. And yet you expect it to be normal? He's like, your elbow will never be normal again. There will just be things that will happen to your elbow that will be completely unexplainable, that And that's just how it is. He's like, that's how it is for all these guys. And they a lot of times freak out. And they're like, what's the cause? Like, why did this happen? And he's like, there is no cause. He's like, it's just like your body's messed up. And they put it back together, but it's never going to be the same. And so this weird stuff is going to happen from time to time. And sometimes it's going to be completely unexplainable. And that's just the answer. It's like, I don't know. You had a weird thing with your wrist, and it was just a weird thing that happened. And then it went away, and it never came back. He's like, no way to know what happened. And I'm like, all right, that makes sense. And that's part of the really difficult mental game that surgeries play with you. It's like, why is this happening? Is this amount of soreness okay? Why did I do everything right this week and my arm felt great, and then I continue to do the same things next week and then my arm feels like crap? Like, no real good reason. Like, it just continues to react in a strange way until it's just like completely behind you. And when it's completely behind you is very unique depending on who you are, so it might be completely behind me at month 14. It might be completely behind someone else at month 19. It just really depends on the person and when they kind of get to their personal finish line, because everyone's personal finish line tends to be different. And so that's the whole big battle between months like, so if it's specifically for like a throwing injury, like a labrum or Tommy John, like from months like 6 to forever, like 6 to 12, but really like 6 to 18, it's just this battle of my command sucks, I can't bounce back very fast, my arm hurts, my arm gets sore, my arm doesn't hurt, my arm's not sore. I throw a chain up, so my arm gets more sore. I throw curveballs, my arm gets less sore. I did this, I did that. Am I ready for this? Am I ready for that? It's just this whole like grab bag of random stuff, and you're like, is this all okay? And it's just like, I don't know. Let's talk to someone about it. Let's think logically and pragmatically about it. And okay, it sounds like, well, you did all of your scheduled stuff. You didn't do too much. You didn't do anything new, right? But you did what we think is appropriate for you at this point, and you didn't overdo it. So, but you got really, really sore and have a little pain. So you're probably fine, but we probably just need to see how it goes for a day or two. That's like a lot of the process from like months 6 to 12. It's all just like kind of going by feel, and there's no like necessarily like this great playbook for it. And that's what's really frustrating and tough, and it's really tough to navigate it just by yourself without some sort of guide, whether it's your coach or other players who've been through it, or your PT's really done a lot of them, whatever it is. And it's tough because your doctor's inaccessible, but really your doctor, his role is to like repair you and then give you to the next people, right? And if you call your doctor and you're freaking out, oh, my arm's hurt, like, he's not going to do another MRI. He's not going to go back in there and just like cut you open and like see. He's like, well, I'll just give it some time and see how it feels. And if it just like is like completely shot or something, then maybe they'll MRI it, and then people will do re-injure them occasionally. But in general, they just kind of throw their hands up. And so you just realize like, okay, the doctor's not going to really say much if I have like day-to-day stuff. What does the PT say? They say wait and see. Let's check it up in a day or two, or 2 days, or 3 days, or let's give it a week, and then we'll see. It's all just like, okay, we'll see. How does it feel now? And you're just throttling up and throttling down, throttling up and throttling down. And that's the bulk of those last 6 months, the 6 to 12, where it's just touch and go, navigating by feel, and try not to go insane, because it's really hard to say, I did everything right this week and my arm feels worse. How could that be? There's just not a good reason for it. So that's kind of been on my mind a little bit, because I've gotten, like I said, a lot of questions. I appreciate the questions, especially on Instagram. I put up a little thing in my story once in a while, say ask me Q&A stuff, and I can 10-second reply, and I've enjoyed that. But it's basically, it's a really long process, and so much of coming back from a surgery is mental it's a really underrated aspect of it, that you forget how mental it is coming back from a surgery. And it's just because you really have to just continue to keep your eyes up and on the horizon and not worry too much about the day-to-day, but at the same time just like keep moving forward every slight amount until one day you're like, oh wait, that didn't seem that bad, like it's baseball season again and I'm back. One day you kind of wake up. And I remember, this will be my last little anecdote here, is that in my second surgery, I I had pain, like I had like no pain, like months, I think 1 through 8. And to be honest, I'll have to check this again, but I'm pretty sure this is accurate. Month 1 through 8, I was like pretty good. And then suddenly I just like started having pain. It just like stuck with me in my elbow. And I just was like, God, every time I throw, I can tell I'm fine, but it just like hurts. And I'm tired of it hurting. And it like wears on you every time it like hurts. And that little nagging voice is like, maybe it's hurt again, or like whatever. Maybe you need to take more days off. But nothing I did seemed to make a dent. It just like kept kind of hurting. And then finally, I just kept throwing through it because you had like mild, low level pain, and it would sometimes like just come and go. Sometimes it would be there when I started, then it would go away when I warmed up, or sometimes when I worn up, when I would warm up, it would get worse. There was like no rhyme or reason, but I just had consistent kind of low, like a 3 or 4 out of 10 kind of elbow pain. And one day, I just didn't have it anymore, and I didn't even realize it. I'd just been throwing through it for like a couple months, and one day I just didn't have it. And then a couple weeks went by, and I was like, wait, my elbow doesn't hurt. And then I started thinking back. I'm like, it didn't hurt last time either, and it didn't hurt the previous time. My elbow hasn't hurt in like a couple weeks. And it was like this like head slap moment. It's like, whoa, my elbow doesn't hurt. And sometimes it's just like that, where you just learn to like, okay, this is just what it feels like for right now. I just keep gritting it out, and you stop to like you stop paying attention to that crying child that is the pain in your shoulder, or your elbow, or your knee, and then before you realize it, just like it stopped, and you're good. And same thing with the soreness at the end. Like you start getting back into like pretty competitive situations where you're pitching someone regularly, but every time you pitch, it like feels kind of crappy the next day or whatever. And after a while, suddenly it's like, oh wait, I pitched yesterday and my arm feels fine. And then you do it again, it's like it still feels fine. Then you're just suddenly there. So it's a long battle, and I don't think there's enough out there on the web about it. That's why I put my Tommy John Chronicles into the world. That's why it's still on YouTube. It was probably shot in like 480p, so it's getting more and more dated by the day, blurrier by the day. But it was something that I couldn't find when I was a player. My first surgery, couldn't find like anything at all. I Googled everything trying to find out like how is the surgery going to go, and couldn't find much at all. Like no firsthand accounts, and none of my teammates at that point had really like had it or had much to say about it. So I put that out there, and I know lots and lots of people have watched it, and I appreciate that. And I know my responses to people's questions have been varied, to being very positive, being very short, to being very like, dude, you just got to get over it. And I probably need to do better at that, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's a long, very misunderstood process still. Like, I don't know that the advice that's out there on the web has changed a ton, and I wish more PTs and former athletes and strength coaches would put something out there about it, whether it's an article or a quick video or something, just to give people another perspective. Like, my voice is just one, but I think there's a lot of people out there who could take a couple quick YouTube videos and just give them some of their insight into how many TJ guys they've worked with, or ACL guys they've worked with, or ACL girls they've worked with, whatever it was, and just gives them perspective, because those people dig. Like, I went to like page 15 of Google. Like, no one goes past like page 1 on Google search results, right? I went deep trying to find stuff. So if you put something out there, if you're a PT listening, or if you're a baseball, softball, ACL, like any kind of person, former athlete who's been through something, put something out there on the web. Put it on YouTube, put it on Instagram, but put it out there somewhere where it'll be permanent. That's why I suggest YouTube more than anything else. But you never know. People are going to dig. They're going to try to find the piece of information that they're looking for, and they might find your video, and it might be really obscure. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be in beautiful high depth. Just depth. What am I saying? High depth, high def. Just put something out there, because I bet you those people will find it, because they're starved for answers. They're starved for firsthand experiences. And if you give them something really genuine that you've been through, because it was a hard process for everyone who's been through it. I'm not the only guy who's been through multiple surgeries by any stretch. It's a very personal process. It's very difficult. And if you put something out there, like I said, people are scouring the web for those answers. I bet you they'll find it, and it'll mean something to them. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this episode. Shoot me a question. Send me an email. Message me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. let me know what else I can talk about in these podcasts, because I want to make them for you if you're listening. And yeah, see you next week on Dear Baseball Gods.